Hi, I'm Randy Nesse, and this is a conversation in the series with visitors to the Arizona State University Center for Evolution Medicine. Today our guest is Jeremy Taylor, who's giving a talk here today based on a book that he's just written about evolution in medicine. The title, Barty by Darwin, How Evolution Shapes Our Health and Transforms Medicine. A very bold title, Transforms Medicine.
Quite a bold cover as well, isn't it?
Quite a bold cover. Before we talk about the book, I'd be more interested in how you got interested in evolution and medicine in particular. You have a 20-year history, at least, with the BBC as a producer and director of science, and further experience doing your own production company, doing science journalism. But now you've written your own book about it. How did this all come about?
Well, it's a fairly sort of elliptical journey, really. I started out, if you're prepared to go that far back, in the late 60s, very early 70s, doing some forms of evolutionary biology as a research student at university. Got bored with it, got sucked into the BBC.
How could you get bored with evolution? Pardon me.
I didn't get bored with evolution, but I got bored planting out lots of squares of vegetation in university botanical gardens, which I didn't really enjoy very much. So I sort of decided that when it came to running experiments and doing all that work, I found that rather boring and not for me, and I think I made my mind up that although I was fascinated by science, I'd rather report on it than do it. And that's what sucked me into the BBC. Well, of course, the early years when you're in the BBC, you have to turn your hand to everything. But my journey started to come back to evolution in the latter years when I was at the BBC, so probably during the 1980s, when I found that I was actually seeking out subjects where I could bring an evolutionary insight onto what seemed to be an otherwise unfathomable problem, or where I could use the way a Darwinian would think about things to try and unpick an unfathomable problem and try and make some sense of it.
So what were some of the problems that fascinated you right from the start?
Well, I think the first film that I can remember was when I picked up a newspaper article which had been written about almost a crisis that had arisen in British adoption agencies, where they were well used after the change in the law to reintroducing people separated by adoption when they were very young children. And to their consternation, they were finding that a lot of brothers and sisters, being reunited in their 20s, 30s or 40s or beyond, had an alarming tendency to fall madly in love with each other.
Oh my.
And then jump madly into bed with each other.
Oh my.
And this, as you can imagine, caused enormous consternation, because this is no way to run an adoption agency.
No.
And they didn't know what on earth was going on. And I just picked hold of that, and I thought, well, what could be going on? Maybe because they've been separated for 20, 30 or 40 years, they've avoided the so-called Westermarck effect.
Well, what's the Westermarck effect?
Well, the Westermarck effect predicts that if you grow up with an opposite-sex sibling, you won't find yourself sexually attracted to.
So that's a tendency shaped by natural selection, is it? Or?
I don't know whether it is or not, but I mean, it was shown in kibbutz in Israel a lot that actually children of mixed sexes quite happily shared dormitories and even bathrooms and things like that in the kibbutz, and there was very little, if any, attempts at having sex with each other or anything like that. They seemed to just treat themselves as brothers and sisters.
Actually, I had understood that some of their parents were quite disappointed because they had hoped that these kids who grew up together would fall in love and stay there together, but they hardly ever did.
No, absolutely. I mean, that just simply could not raise any spark of sexual interest in each other. It was entirely platonic, and that's the Westermarck effect.
So this would be a good tendency to avoid incest and avoid all the bad things that happen when two people whose genes are too similar get together?
Well, yes, it would, yes. But there's also an element of that, for instance, that was what they call genetic similarity theory, which is at what distance do we prefer to mate with each other, if you like.
So at least a certain distance we should prefer.
Yeah.
Anything more than that?
Well, Francis Galton was the pioneer of this. He built up a huge library at what is now University College London of pairs, married pairs. So you've got husband and wife and all sorts of ages and matching photographs. So you have a pane of a photograph with the man and the woman facing each other, quite often in profile, and he would look to see how similar their faces were. And of course, this is what we now call assortative mating, that actually we are in fact obeying cryptic clues to near similarity in our choice of mates, and that's been shown over a whole number of aspects of our anatomy and behaviour that we couldn't possibly really be consciously measuring when we were sizing up somebody.
So I understand there's some research showing that the HLA antigens, which you're not even aware you have them, to some degree determine who you're attracted to. Is that something?
I don't know much about that, but it would make sense because if you are looking for a mate, there are two opposing forces, I suspect. One is that you don't want a very close match in terms of HLA antigens, because if there is great sort of histocompatibility matching, it means that your progeny may not have a wide spectrum of disease resistance.
Right.
And it also means that there's a possibility that you will share recessive genes with this partner, which may become homozygous in your child and therefore potentially lethal.
Right. So even the tendency for who we're attracted to might be something that has something to do with natural selection, shaping these systems. And of course, in many other species as well. Is that right?
Well, I would imagine so, yes. But I mean, as you've probably gathered, my focus for some time has been on trying to apply evolutionary insights to the human condition.